Martha Henley clutched her 3-year-old daughter Emma close as the landlord's heavy footsteps echoed up the tenement stairs. The cramped Chicago room held nothing but a broken chair, their few belongings in a battered suitcase, and the overwhelming smell of desperation. Through the thin walls, she could hear other families' arguments about rent, food, and survival. Martha's hands trembled as she counted the coins in her palm, barely enough for one more day. The industrial city that had promised opportunities after her husband's death had delivered only crushing poverty and endless rejections from employers who saw a young widow with a child as nothing but trouble. The correspondence with Thomas Mitchell had begun 6 months ago, his letters arriving like lifelines thrown to a drowning woman. He wrote of his farm in Dry Creek Station, Montana, of wide open spaces where a child could run free, of a simple life far from the suffocating smoke and noise of the city. His photograph showed a weathered but kind face, hands that spoke of honest work, eyes that seemed to understand hardship. Martha had responded with careful honesty about Emma, about her late husband's debts, about her willingness to work hard for a chance at stability. Thomas had written back immediately, "A child is a blessing, and hard workers are always welcome here." The train journey stretched across 3 long days, each mile carrying Martha further from everything familiar into an unknown future. Emma pressed her face against the window, mesmerized by the endless prairies and distant mountains, while Martha reread Thomas's letters until the pages grew soft from handling. Other passengers cast curious glances at the young woman traveling alone with a small child, their expressions a mixture of pity and judgment. Martha kept her chin high, reminding herself that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was moving forward despite it. The rhythmic clacking of wheels on tracks became a mantra: new life, new hope, new beginning. Before we continue, leave your like, share our story, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. The train wheezed to a stop at Dry Creek Station, and Martha's heart immediately clenched with dread. Instead of Thomas Mitchell's familiar face, a somber group of townspeople waited on the platform, their expressions heavy with the weight of terrible news. Sheriff Coleman stepped forward, removing his hat with practiced solemnity, and spoke the words that shattered her carefully built hopes. "Ma'am, I'm afraid Thomas Mitchell passed 3 days ago in a farming accident." The world seemed to tilt beneath Martha's feet as Emma tugged at her skirt, sensing the sudden change in her mother's demeanor. The small train station, which should have been the gateway to their new life, suddenly felt like the edge of an abyss. The townspeople's voices blended into a sympathetic murmur as Martha struggled to process the crushing reality. Mrs. Patterson, the station master's wife, explained with genuine kindness how Thomas's wagon had overturned during a storm, how they'd found him the next morning beneath the heavy load of timber he'd been hauling. "He spoke of you often these past weeks," she said softly, "showed everyone your picture, talked about the little girl, but sympathy couldn't solve the immediate crisis." Martha had spent her last dollars on train tickets, had no money for return passage, and possessed only the address of a dead man. Emma began to cry, hungry and tired, and the sound cut through Martha's shock like a knife. "The children are still out at the farm," Sheriff Coleman said reluctantly, as if mentioning them might complicate an already impossible situation. 5 of them. Thomas was caring for his brother's family after they died of fever last winter. Martha's breath caught as the full scope of the tragedy became clear. Not only had her intended husband died, but 5 orphan children were now completely alone on an isolated farm. The sheriff's expression suggested this information was meant as context, not as her responsibility. But something deep in Martha's chest twisted painfully. As the train whistle blew its departure warning, she realized she faced a choice that would define not just her future, but the futures of 6 children who needed anyone to care. Martha made her decision with the swift certainty of a mother's instinct, surprising even herself with the steadiness of her voice. "I need to see them," she told the sheriff, ignoring the concerned looks exchanged among the townspeople. The sheriff hesitated, clearly preferring to send her back on the departing train. But Mrs. Patterson stepped forward with firm kindness. "Of course she does. Those children have been through enough. They deserve to know what's happened." As the train pulled away in a cloud of steam and smoke, carrying with it Martha's only sure path back to Chicago, she felt both terrified and strangely liberated. Emma had stopped crying and was watching everything with the wide-eyed curiosity of a child who trusted her mother completely. The wagon ride to the Mitchell farm stretched through rolling hills covered in autumn grass, the landscape both beautiful and austere under the vast Montana sky. Sheriff Coleman explained the children's situation in careful, measured words. Thomas had been their only living relative. The farm was mortgaged to the bank, and the county would soon need to make arrangements for their care. There are families willing to take one or two, he said, but finding homes for all five. He let the sentence hang, unfinished, its implications clear. Martha felt her chest tighten as she imagined 5 siblings being separated, scattered across the territory like seeds in the wind. When Emma pointed excitedly at a hawk circling overhead, Martha made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. I want to stay and help them. The sheriff's eyebrows rose in obvious concern as he studied Martha's determined expression. Ma'am, with respect, you don't understand the full situation. These children have nothing, no inheritance, no security, no legal guardian. The farm can't support them, and you, well, you're not even their stepmother, technically. His words were meant as gentle discouragement, but they only strengthened Martha's resolve. She had come west prepared to marry a stranger and help raise his children. Finding those children orphaned didn't change her willingness to care for them. I understand the situation perfectly, she replied firmly. What I don't understand is how separating 5 siblings who've already lost everything serves anyone's best interests. Mrs. Patterson, who had insisted on accompanying them, reached over and squeezed Martha's hand with surprising warmth. Thomas chose well when he chose you, she said quietly. He always said he needed someone with a strong heart for those children. The sheriff shook his head, clearly uncomfortable with the complications this decision would create. But Martha felt a strange peace settling over her. She had spent months in Chicago feeling powerless, watching circumstances control her life, accepting whatever scraps of work or charity others offered. Now, for the first time in years, she was choosing her own path, difficult though it might be. As they approached the farmhouse, Martha's heart clenched at the sight of 5 small figures huddled together on the crooked porch. The children ranged in age from perhaps 14 down to maybe 6. Their clothes patched but clean, their faces bearing the solemn expression of young people who had learned too early that life was fragile and uncertain. The eldest, a boy with Thomas's same broad shoulders, stood protectively in front of the others, his stance wary and defensive. When the wagon stopped, none of the children moved or spoke, but Martha could see the desperate hope and fear warring in their eyes. Emma wriggled in her lap, eager to meet other children, oblivious to the complex tragedy that had brought them all together. Martha climbed down from the wagon with Emma in her arms and approached the porch with careful, deliberate steps, understanding instinctively that these children had endured too much surprise, too much sudden change. Hello, she said simply, her voice steady despite her racing heart. My name is Martha, and this is Emma. We came here expecting to meet Thomas, and we're so very sorry for your loss. The eldest boy's jaw tightened, clearly preparing to reject whatever pity or charity they might offer, but something in Martha's straightforward honesty seemed to pierce his defenses. The youngest girl, barely older than Emma, took a tentative step forward, her thumb firmly planted in her mouth. In that moment, Martha realized she wasn't just entering their physical world of dust and hardship, she was stepping into their emotional landscape of loss, uncertainty, and desperate need for stability. Inside the small farmhouse, Martha was struck by the evidence of Thomas's careful preparations for her arrival. A new dress hung on a peg by the door, clearly chosen with hopeful anticipation, while a child's wooden rocking horse sat half-finished on the kitchen table, obviously intended as a surprise for Emma. The 5 Mitchell children, Samuel, Rebecca, twins James and Joseph, and little Mary, moved through the space with the practiced efficiency of young people forced to grow up too quickly. Rebecca, at 12, had clearly taken charge of the household, while Samuel managed the outdoor work with a seriousness far beyond his 14 years. The tenderness in their interactions with each other, the way they automatically shared food and responsibilities, spoke of bonds forged by shared survival. That first evening, as Martha helped Rebecca prepare a simple supper from their meat supplies, she began to understand the full scope of their situation. The children had been living on stored vegetables and the milk from their one remaining cow, stretching every resource while hoping Thomas would return. He went to town to buy supplies for when you came, Rebecca explained quietly, stirring a pot of thin soup, said he wanted everything to be perfect. The unfinished preparations for Martha's arrival, the half-sewn curtains, the carefully cleared space for Emma's things, created a poignant testament to hopes that would never be fulfilled. Yet Martha felt no regret about her decision to stay. Instead, she felt a growing determination to honor Thomas's intentions in whatever way she could. Emma adapted to the farm with the quick resilience of childhood, delighting in the chickens, and following Mary everywhere like an adoring shadow. Watching her daughter laugh for the first time in months, Martha felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the fire crackling in the hearth. The Mitchell children were equally charmed by Emma's innocent enthusiasm, and even Samuel's stern expressions softened when the 3-year-old insisted on helping him with chores. These small moments of connection gave Martha hope that they could become a real family, not just a collection of people thrown together by circumstance. But she also noticed the way the children's eyes followed every bite of food, the careful way they rationed even their affection, as if afraid that caring too much would make the inevitable loss more painful. The practical challenges became clear within the first week. The farm's finances were in shambles, with debts to the general store, the bank, and several neighbors who had extended credit out of sympathy for the orphaned children. The roof leaked in 2 places, the chimney smoked, and winter was approaching with alarming speed. Martha's small savings wouldn't stretch far, and her only skill, sewing and basic bookkeeping, seemed inadequate for the magnitude of their needs. Yet each morning brought small victories: Emma learning to gather eggs, Rebecca teaching Martha to milk the cow, the boys showing her how Thomas had planned to expand the vegetable garden. These daily rhythms began to feel like the foundation of something permanent and precious. Sunday brought their first real test when they attended church together, the entire congregation's eyes following their unusual family group. Martha held her head high despite the whispers and stares, Emma's small hand clasped in hers while the Mitchell children flanked them with defensive solidarity. Reverend Walsh's sermon on caring for orphans seemed pointedly directed at their situation, but it was the conversations afterward that revealed the community's true feelings. Several families approached with offers to take 1 or 2 of the children, their generosity genuine, but their inability to understand the children's need to stay together equally genuine. Martha politely declined each offer, her protective instincts strengthening with every well-meaning suggestion that the family be divided. That evening, as Martha tucked Emma into the bed they shared, Mary appeared in the doorway clutching a worn rag doll. "Will you stay forever?" the 6-year-old asked with the heartbreaking directness of childhood. Martha's throat tightened as she looked into eyes that had already seen too much loss, too much uncertainty. "I'm not going anywhere," she promised, surprised by the absolute certainty in her own voice. "We're a family now, and families stick together." Mary climbed into bed beside Emma, and within minutes both girls were asleep, their small bodies radiating the deep peace of children who finally felt safe. Standing in the doorway, watching over these 2 innocent faces, Martha felt her heart fully commit to a future she couldn't yet envision but was determined to create. October brought the first real crisis when Sheriff Coleman arrived with a representative from the county. Mr. Whitmore, a thin man with calculating eyes, surveyed the farm with obvious disapproval, noting the needed repairs, the modest harvest, the financial obligations that far exceeded their resources. "This arrangement is clearly unsustainable," he announced, consulting his papers with bureaucratic efficiency. "The children need proper homes with established families who can provide for their needs." His tone suggested that Martha's presence was a temporary inconvenience to be quickly resolved, not a legitimate attempt to preserve the children's family unit. Samuel stepped closer to Martha, his young shoulders squared in unconscious mimicry of an adult protector, while the other children clustered around them like chicks seeking shelter. The county's plan was precisely what Martha had feared. Samuel would go to a ranching family who needed strong workers, Rebecca to a household that required domestic help, the twins to separate farming families, and little Mary to a childless couple in town. "They'll have opportunities for education, proper clothing, regular meals," Mr. Whitmore explained, as if these material benefits outweighed the emotional devastation of separation. Martha felt her anger rise, sharp and protective, as she watched the children's faces grow pale with terror. "And what about love?" she demanded. "What about keeping brothers and sisters together? What about honoring what these children have already built together?" Her voice carried across the farmyard with surprising force, causing even the chickens to pause their pecking. That night, Martha found Samuel sitting alone on the porch, his shoulders shaking with the effort to contain his emotions. "I won't go," he said fiercely when she sat beside him. "I won't leave them." Thomas promised we'd always stay together. The boy's voice cracked on his uncle's name, revealing the grief he'd been carrying with such determined stoicism. Martha wrapped her shawl around both of them, offering what comfort she could while her mind raced through possibilities. She had no legal rights, no financial resources, no standing in the community, but she had something Mr. Whitmore's carefully planned separations couldn't provide: the absolute determination to keep this family whole. "We'll find a way," she promised, though she had no idea how Rebecca proved to be an unexpected ally in their fight. Her 12-year-old mind, surprisingly strategic in its thinking. "Mrs. Patterson says if you married Uncle Thomas officially, even after he died, it might make a legal difference," she whispered as they prepared breakfast. "Like if there were papers or promises or something." Martha's heart quickened at the possibility, though she wondered if such a thing were even possible. The idea of a posthumous marriage seemed desperate, even ridiculous, but desperate times called for creative solutions. If there was any legal precedent, any loophole that might give her standing as the children's guardian, she would pursue it with every ounce of determination she possessed. A visit to the town's only lawyer, Mr. Henderson, revealed both hope and harsh reality. While a posthumous marriage was legally questionable, Thomas had indeed written a letter to the county before his death, expressing his intention to marry Martha and his desire for her to help care for the children. "It's not a will, exactly," Henderson explained, adjusting his spectacles, "but it does demonstrate intent. Combined with your presence here, your care for the children, it might carry some weight with a sympathetic judge." The legal fees would consume most of Martha's remaining savings, and success was far from guaranteed. But the alternative, watching 5 children be scattered to the winds, was unthinkable. "Do whatever you can," Martha said firmly. "These children are worth every risk." As word of Martha's legal challenge spread through the community, reactions were sharply divided. Some families, particularly those with large broods of their own, supported her efforts out of understanding for the bonds between siblings. Others, especially those who had offered to take individual children, felt insulted by her rejection of their generosity. Mrs. Patterson emerged as an unexpected champion, organizing meals for the family and quietly countering the whispered criticisms with firm reminders of Christian duty. "That woman came here prepared to be a mother," she declared at the general store, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had earned respect through decades of community service. "Just because circumstances changed doesn't mean her heart did." The bank's ultimatum arrived on a gray November morning, delivered by a nervous clerk who could barely meet Martha's eyes. The mortgage payments were 3 months overdue, the farm would be foreclosed within 30 days, and all occupants would need to vacate immediately. Martha's hands trembled as she read the official notice, its legal language spelling out the destruction of everything they had tried to build. Without the farm, she would have no basis for claiming the children, no home to offer them, no argument for keeping them together. The children gathered around her, their faces pale with understanding, and Martha realized that Mr. Whitmore had been more cunning than she'd suspected. He had simply waited for financial reality to solve his problem for him. That evening, Martha sat at Thomas's old desk, surrounded by ledgers, bills, and the impossible mathematics of survival. The farm's debts exceeded any reasonable expectation of income, even if the next year's harvest proved exceptionally good. But as she sorted through Thomas's papers, she discovered something unexpected: a life insurance policy taken out just 6 months before his death, with the children named as beneficiaries. The policy was small, barely enough to cover the immediate debts, but it represented a crucial piece of evidence that Thomas had indeed intended to provide for the children's future. More importantly, the policy required a legal guardian to claim the funds, and Martha was the only adult living with the children who could credibly make that claim. The discovery of the insurance policy energized Martha's legal challenge, but it also attracted unwanted attention from relatives she hadn't known existed. Thomas's distant cousin, Edgar Mitchell, arrived from Denver with his well-dressed wife and their own legal representation, claiming authority over the children as their nearest blood relative. Edgar was everything Martha was not: established, wealthy, connected to powerful people who could smooth bureaucratic obstacles. His proposal was superficially generous. He would pay off the farm's debts, arrange proper educations for the children, and ensure their material needs were met. But his plan still involved separating the children, placing them in different boarding schools and apprenticeships, according to his assessment of their individual potentials. The confrontation between Martha and Edgar played out in Henderson's cramped office, their competing visions for the children's future laid bare in stark terms. Edgar spoke of advantages, opportunities, the benefits of exposure to cultured society and modern conveniences. Martha spoke of love, continuity, the children's own expressed desires to remain together. "You're asking them to sacrifice their futures for sentiment," Edgar argued, his tone condescendingly reasonable. "I'm asking you to consider that their emotional well-being is part of their future," Martha replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Henderson listened carefully, taking notes, but his expression suggested that the legal complexities far exceeded his small-town experience. The children's own voices became the most powerful element in the growing legal battle. Samuel, despite his youth, spoke with mature dignity about his responsibility to his siblings and his promise to Thomas. Rebecca's testimony revealed the depth of her domestic capabilities and her fierce determination to keep the family together. Even little Mary, prompted by gentle questions, expressed her preference to stay with Mama Martha and her new sister Emma. Their words carried emotional weight, but Martha knew that sentiment alone wouldn't triumph over Edgar's superior legal position and financial resources. She needed something more concrete, more legally compelling, than the love that bound this makeshift family together. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: Thomas's personal effects, which the sheriff had stored pending settlement of his estate. Among his belongings, Martha discovered a partially completed adoption petition, dated just weeks before Thomas's death, formally requesting to adopt his brother's children and make them his legal heirs. The document bore his signature and had been witnessed by 2 townspeople, though it had never been filed with the court. More crucially, attached to the petition was a letter specifically naming Martha as his intended wife and expressing his desire for her to share in the responsibility of raising the children. "She has already proven herself a devoted mother," Thomas had written, "and I believe these children would benefit immeasurably from her maternal influence." Henderson's excitement over the discovery was palpable, his small-town practice suddenly energized by a case with genuine legal complexity and emotional resonance. The incomplete adoption petition, combined with Thomas's letter of intent regarding Martha, created a unique precedent that might support her guardianship claim. "It's not perfect," he warned, "but it demonstrates clear intention from the children's intended adoptive father. Combined with your established relationship with the children and your financial ability to claim the insurance policy, we have the foundation for a compelling argument." For the first time since arriving in Montana, Martha felt that victory might actually be possible, though she knew Edgar's superior resources would make the battle fierce and unpredictable. Edgar's response to Martha's strengthened legal position was swift and ruthless. Within days, county officials arrived to inspect the farm, documenting every needed repair, every financial shortcoming, every aspect of their circumstances that might be deemed unsuitable for child rearing. The inspector's report painted a picture of poverty and neglect that bore little resemblance to the warm, functioning household Martha had worked so hard to create. Worse, rumors began circulating about Martha's fitness as a guardian, whispers about her unmarried status, her financial desperation, her presumption in claiming children who weren't her own. The children sensed the growing hostility from some community members, their shoulders hunching with shame that broke Martha's heart. The emotional toll of the legal battle began wearing on everyone, particularly the children who found themselves caught between competing adults' visions for their future. Samuel started having nightmares about being separated from his siblings, while Rebecca threw herself into household tasks with obsessive intensity, as if perfect domestic performance might somehow secure their family's survival. The twins became quieter and more clingy, and even Emma seemed to sense the tension that filled their small home. Martha struggled to maintain normalcy while simultaneously preparing for a court battle that would determine whether the family they had built together could legally continue to exist. The crisis reached its peak on a bitter December morning when county officials arrived with a court order to remove the children pending the guardianship hearing. Martha watched in horror as the children were loaded into a wagon, their few possessions hastily packed, their faces streaming with tears that seemed to accuse her of failing to protect them. Emma cried for her sister Mary as the wagon pulled away, and Martha felt something break inside her chest, the confident determination that had carried her through months of struggle suddenly shattered by the reality of legal powerlessness. Standing alone in the suddenly empty farmhouse, surrounded by the evidence of their brief happiness, Martha faced the darkest moment of her life and wondered if her love and determination would be enough to bring her children home. The guardianship hearing took place in the county courthouse, an imposing stone building that seemed designed to intimidate rather than inspire confidence in justice. Martha sat at Henderson's side, wearing her one good dress and the determined expression she had cultivated through months of struggle, while Edgar's expensive lawyer spread impressive documents across the opposing table. Judge Morrison, a weathered man with keen eyes, listened carefully as both sides presented their arguments, occasionally asking probing questions that revealed his understanding of the case's complexity. The courtroom gallery was packed with townspeople, their divided loyalties creating an atmosphere thick with tension and expectation. Edgar's presentation was polished and persuasive, emphasizing his financial stability, his blood relationship to the children, and his ability to provide educational and social advantages that Martha could never match. His lawyer painted Martha as a well-meaning but impractical woman, whose emotional attachment to the children blinded her to their real needs. These children deserve more than love, he argued smoothly. They deserve opportunity, security, and the guidance of someone with the resources to ensure their proper development. Edgar himself testified with calm confidence about his plans for each child, his words revealing genuine care but also an unsettling certainty that he knew what was best regardless of their own preferences. When Martha took the witness stand, her voice initially trembled with nervousness, but as she spoke about the children, their personalities, their needs, their fierce loyalty to each other, her words gained strength and conviction. She described the daily rhythms of their life together, the way Samuel had taught Emma to feed the chickens, how Rebecca had patiently helped her learn to preserve vegetables, the twins' elaborate bedtime stories that made Mary giggle despite her grief. "I didn't come here intending to be their mother," Martha testified, "but intention isn't what makes a family. Love is. Daily care is. Showing up every single day is. And I have shown up, I am showing up, and I will keep showing up for as long as these children need me." The children's own testimony proved to be the hearing's most powerful moment. Samuel spoke with dignity beyond his years about his responsibility to his siblings and his confidence in Martha's love and protection. Rebecca's clear articulation of her desire to remain with Martha and her detailed description of their daily life together revealed a maturity that impressed even Edgar's lawyer. When little Mary was gently asked whom she wanted to live with, her tearful Mama Martha echoed through the courtroom with devastating clarity. Even the twins, usually tongue-tied around strangers, managed to express their preference for staying together with the woman who had read them stories and taught them to help with farm chores. Their unified voice created an emotional crescendo that left few dry eyes in the courtroom. Judge Morrison's deliberations stretched through the longest afternoon of Martha's life, the courtroom gradually emptying as people returned to their daily routines while she and the children waited in agonizing uncertainty. When the judge finally returned, his expression was grave but not unkind as he addressed the packed courtroom. "This case presents competing visions of what constitutes the children's best interests," he began, his words measured and careful. "Mr. Mitchell offers material advantages that cannot be dismissed lightly. Mrs. Henley offers continuity, emotional stability, and perhaps most importantly, the preservation of sibling bonds that have already suffered tremendous loss." The pause that followed seemed to last forever, Martha's heart pounding so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. However, Judge Morrison continued, "Thomas Mitchell's documented intentions, the children's clear preferences, and Mrs. Henley's demonstrated commitment to their welfare create a compelling argument for keeping this family unit intact." The relief that flooded through Martha was so intense she nearly collapsed, tears streaming down her face as the judge outlined the terms of his decision. Martha would be granted guardianship of all 5 children, with the understanding that Edgar's offer of financial support for their education would be accepted and formalized. The farm would be sold to pay debts, but the insurance money would provide a foundation for their new life, wherever they chose to establish it. The months following the court decision brought challenges Martha hadn't anticipated, but also joys that exceeded her wildest hopes. The sale of the farm provided enough money to rent a house in town, where the children could attend school regularly, and Martha could take in sewing to supplement their income. Edgar, surprisingly gracious in defeat, proved true to his promise of educational support, though he insisted on regular reports about each child's progress. Samuel showed remarkable aptitude for mechanics and found an apprenticeship at the railroad depot, while Rebecca's intelligence and domestic skills caught the attention of the schoolteacher who began preparing her for higher education. The twins discovered a talent for music, and little Mary blossomed under the security of a permanent home and mother's love. By spring, their unconventional family had found its rhythm in their new life. Martha's reputation as a seamstress grew, bringing steady income and respect from the community that had once questioned her fitness as a guardian. Emma started school alongside Mary, the two girls' friendship deepening into true sisterhood, while the older children took pride in their family's stability and Martha's growing prominence in town affairs. Sunday dinners around their table became a celebration of their survival and success. 6 children, and one determined woman who had defied convention and law, to prove that families are built through love and daily commitment rather than blood alone. On a warm evening in late spring, Martha sat on the porch of their rented house, watching Emma and Mary play in the small garden while the older children finished their homework at the kitchen table. A letter had arrived that day from a man in Oregon, recently widowed, seeking a mail-order bride to help raise his young son. Martha had read it once, smiled, and tucked it away in her desk drawer without a second thought. She had come to Montana seeking security through marriage and had found something far more precious, a family bound not by law or blood, but by choice, love, and the daily miracle of showing up for each other through every joy and sorrow life might bring. The children's laughter drifted through the open windows as Rebecca helped the twins with their arithmetic while Samuel read aloud from an adventure story that had all of them enthralled. These evening sounds had become Martha's favorite music, the soundtrack of a life she couldn't have imagined when she first stepped off that train in Dry Creek Station. Thomas Mitchell's death had ended one dream, but it had opened the door to another, a dream of motherhood multiplied, of love expanded beyond what she had thought possible, of family redefined by commitment rather than convention. The woman who had come west seeking stability for one child had found purpose in protecting and nurturing 6. As stars appeared in the vast Montana sky, Martha reflected on the journey that had brought them all to this peaceful moment. She had learned that love wasn't something that happened to you, it was something you chose. Again and again, through doubt and difficulty, through legal battles and financial struggles, through the daily work of caring for hearts that had been broken and needed time to heal. The children sleeping safely in their beds had taught her that family wasn't a destination but a daily choice, not a legal contract but a commitment to show up, to protect, to nurture, and to never, ever give up on the bonds that make life meaningful. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, they were home, all of them, together, exactly as they should be.